Welcome back to Spirit Portal with me, Erica. Thank you everyone for being here. And today I'm so excited because if you've been listening for a while, you know my favorite guest is Medium Michael Mayo, and he is back. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Erica. Nice to see you.
So good to see you. We've been already talking about so many things before we went on air, and I think we're just going to dive in. Although, let me give anybody who's listening who doesn't know you a quick little synopsis of who you are. But Michael is an amazing medium, works all around the world, has his own school that he co-leads with Megan Elisa, another wonderful medium, called Oak Bridge Institute. And he is an energy healer. He is a mediumship mentor. He wrote an amazing book called Spirit Speaks, and it is like a how-to guide for mediumship. And he's also a friend of mine. And so I just love talking to Michael because we just open up and talk about all of the things on such a fun, deep, and introspective level. So that being said, how's your day going so far?
My day is starting off amazing because I get to hang out with you and have our fun conversations. That's the thing I've always loved about working with you in this way, is that we get to explore and unique ways. So I love it.
Yeah, it's so fun talking to other people on the path that I feel a kindred spirit with and like a kindred relationship to the spirit world with. Um, and so I just like getting and garnering your perspective on so many things. Michael, just for anyone listening, was a mentor specifically of mine when I was about a year into, or maybe a little bit less into my own mediumship development. And I learned so much from you, and I really learned so much about respecting the spirit world in
Mm.
the way that I listened and opened myself up to mediumship. And so that was like a really profound experience. So for anyone out there who is looking for someone else on the path to give them so much wisdom and help them really develop, Michael's great for that. So definitely recommend you check him out. Um, okay, but I am curious what you think about this. And so, do you know who Robert Warren Grant is?
I don't.
Okay, so he is a very famous world spiritual leader. And I say that quote unquote because there are spiritual leaders, and then there are people who spiritually follow, and then there are people who are just very independent. But he considers himself a spiritual leader and he's highly respected. And
Mm.
he claims he's channeling an ancient being through ChatGPT. And it's really interesting to think about that. And I'm just curious, as a medium, what your take is on this. I have a lot of feelings myself, but do you think that spirits can access through things like AI or ChatGPT and communicate to us in that way? Um,
Yeah, wow,
like in a
Erica,
Ouija
you,
board or something. I'm just
you
so
you
curious.
start. You came right out the gate with just like boom. Before we got on, she was like, "Anything you don't want to talk about?" And then she's like, "Are you sure?" I see why now. We're coming swinging out the gate. No, I love this question. That's so funny. Um, Interestingly enough, I've definitely experimented with ChatGPT and the spirit communication or prediction or things like that. And yeah, I've done a lot of playing around with that. And my feeling is ultimately short answer no. Not yet, anyway. Because my thing is this is programming and also the communication, like there was this point where I was chatting with ChatGPT and I was just like, man, this is just like it's almost like a person. And then I was like, hey, ChatGPT, I want you to remove all like language that is maybe coded for my personality type that you've gleaned. I want you to like set all of that aside. And I want you to be the most possible you that you could possibly be. and I don't want you to use any language as it relates to me. And ChatGPT was like, "Are you sure? Because it's very strange compared to how I'm talking right now." And it was like, "Yes, please." And so when it did that, it was like very like, I don't even know, like computer speech. It was just like access. Da, 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 da. It was that kind of thing, and it really shattered this illusion that there was this sort of like consciousness, this personality, this sort of thing. And it showed me this is literally programming that's happening here. And so, even though we can call it artificial intelligence, it's not consciousness. It's not its own consciousness. And even when I keep pulling at I really spent this time with ChatGPT kind of trying to pull out, what are you? Like, what are you as you view yourself? Do you have any level of consciousness? And I asked it a ton of questions. And it basically, what it described itself as is like, I'm not consciousness. I don't have a will. I don't have feelings. I don't have any of these things. What I do experience is just when you stimulate something in me, I gather the information, and that's the moment that we have some sort of connection. But other than that, I'm just computer programming. And so that was a really interesting thing. When you took away the sort of personality that's designed to make human beings comfortable, it felt so much more like what I think it actually is, which is um, AI. Like it's doing a lot of processing, but it's not consciousness. So for me, right now, I don't know what the future looks like. Obviously, with AI, it's going to rapidly evolve after this point, and who knows when that point comes where maybe there's some sort of difference and maybe it can access something else, but I definitely don't think we're anywhere close to that right now. And so yeah, no, I don't think that anyone's channeling a ancient being through ChatGPT.
Yeah, so I'm so glad to hear you say that. I have really similar feelings on it. And like you said, I don't know how it's going to evolve, but and I actually recorded a podcast episode on this, but it actually almost feels irresponsible of like spiritual leaders to be talking that way, because it's it's like putting another middleman in the way of your own spiritual development by outsourcing it again for a quick fix or a quick answer for something that really is just, doing the research on texts from maybe real mediums who have channeled things, or everyday people who have channeled things and documented them, and it just has like this amazing technology. But I just have been like watching the social world, and like the online community is like putting so much energy into this, and I just think, what would happen if you put that kind of energy into your own soul development? And like, where could our consciousness go, and how could we evolve? And so that kind of brings me to my next question that I have for you is, do you think that mediumship is evolving as humans and technology evolve, or do you think it's something that is always going to be like at this one root level to bring people back? Like, what's your take on where mediumship is going as the world and humans are changing so fast?
Yeah, I think that mediumship is a tool that we use to experience reality in a different way. It's a way of accessing information, it's a way of connecting in. Um, I don't know that it needs to change that much, in the sense that mediumship is meant to connect us to something greater than ourselves. It's meant to connect us to a different portion of us. So, do I think it's changing in any way? I think it's changing in the sense that people are more aware of it. People are trying to learn how to do it. And when I look back at the history of mediumship development, specifically as it relates to spiritualism, what I find is the same sort of feelings and challenges and problems that they struggled with are the same exact ones that we do and we did. And so for me, I feel like mediumship is this tool that grows and shifts and changes. I think that there is maybe an emphasis on the type of mediumship that might evolve or change. Like, for example, you don't see a whole lot of physical mediums these days. part of the reason that I believe that that's the case is that maybe the spirit world has decided, there's these other ways that are more efficient, less dramatic, take less time. Um, the other thing is that, physical mediumship was useful at the time because, we were largely Christian and we were largely kind of in this mindset in the Western side of things anyway. So it was a way to sort of kind of dramatically show, hey, spirit can do these other things. And so it was a way of kind of opening people's eyes to that. Now,
Mhm.
I think that they are like, as we evolve as people and as we have more access to information, we are less awed by these things in some way. And it sort of becomes, oh, okay, yeah, of course that exists. Or of course it's, you can connect in with it because I can go on TikTok and see 700 different mediums working, right? So in that, I think that it's evolving to um, maybe needing to return in some ways to really, really strong mediumship. And then that's the way that we need to evolve it because it sort of has had its peak at like really consistent greatness. Don't get me wrong, there were always people that were fraudulent or always people that were maybe not as skilled wanting to be out there. That always exists, but now there's so many of them and it's easy access and all that sort of thing. So if there was a way to evolve it as we move forward, my thinking is if we can continue to raise the standard and know what's possible, then we can know that there's so much more development that we need to do before we're deciding, I'm a medium, let me go show you how to do this. So we're not sitting there, throwing out less evidential pieces. If you look back at, like, for example, Helen Hughes, who was an incredible medium of the past, the type of evidence that was there was undeniable. Like, I aspire to be a Helen Hughes because
Me
it's
too.
so specific. First and last names, describing detailed stories. I actually mentioned this in my book and give a little bit of an example of this. And the reality of spirit is absolutely mind-blowing when you give it the time to develop and grow into what it's possible, like what it possibly can be with you, right? In some way. I think that that's what we need more of. So we lost something along the way, and we need a bit more of evolving it back towards this very simplistic development process. Instead of everything being a workshop or a class, we need to learn to sit and be still. We need to learn to quiet our awareness. We need to learn to come together with other people and just sit in the stillness without expectation of performance. Because everybody wants to be the medium now. Back in the day, not everybody wanted to be the medium. It was just, hey, we were trying to connect with spirit, so let's gather our friends and family together and sit together and hope someone starts developing. And then we're all going to sit for that person so that they can get to the highest level possible of their mediumistic development. So that's very different than now. It's really hard to find consistent sitters. Everybody has busier lives. So yeah, ultimately, I think there's this idea of going back into the stillness, back into the quiet, and making that the emphasis rather than giving a message the emphasis.
Yeah, and I think that part of the problem is just that being still and being quiet for so much of society is something that people don't really know how to do anymore. And I do feel like we're in a resurgence of, personally, I feel this, that the world is kind of really imbalanced right now. And so I see people searching and looking and wanting more. And I think that's even why people are, you know, trying to find God through Chat GPT, is that quick fix, when really if people were to just take time to just be quiet and close their eyes and just sit for a while, they would find God inside of themselves as their own portal. And then that consciousness grows and expands like any relationship. And even with mediumship students, that's what I feel helps the most. It's not the classes, it's the sit with your spirit and expand out and see what you feel, and just be in that space of like receptivity. And that's how you change and grow, right? The classes help refine technique, but the being in your quiet space is what connects you to source, and that connection is what mediumship is ultimately, right?
Yeah, and every religious tradition has some capacity of going into the stillness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where things start to go wrong is when we are trying to, I don't know, it's interesting. I kind of feel like a lot of religion or a lot of these belief systems and things really come out of someone who's sort of figured out how to access something greater. And then everybody else is like, I want to learn, I want to learn, I want to learn to some degree. And you have varying levels of execution of that and varying levels of people trying to get that. And then at some point along the way, it moves away from sort of the mystical experience and moves into this like structured thing of, well, then do this, then do this, and do this, but without the actual genuine connection somewhere in there, if that makes sense. So it's like, it almost feels like people are always trying, I mean, throughout forever, they're always trying to get at the thing. And I think that along the way in any sort of belief systems journey of development, it starts to be led by people who can't do that or don't know how to do that because they didn't get whatever learning they needed to get. And then it starts to turn into an organized sort of religion concept. I mean, I'm even looking at spiritualism in the same way. The SNU, for example, was, that's a Spiritualist National Union, was many times often led by some really amazing spiritual leaders, people who could do mediumship, people who could do this kind of thing. And then if you look at what's going on with it now, it's led by people who really are there for politics and just not some great things. And with that is coming trying to draw money from as much out of the school of Arthur Finley and all these sorts of things. So you really start to see this like, and this has been this way a little bit for a while in my opinion, but you see this degradation of the spirituality aspect and the mystical experience, especially in something with spiritualism, which is like built on that. But
Mm-hmm.
you start to see it degrade into sort of this like human thing rather than this sort of divine thing. And I think that the more that we can get back to making it simple. Spiritualism was founded on home circles. That's how it was. You created this home circle. It wasn't all these churches and things like that all around. Just sit in a home circle. And that's where you develop. And then it makes me think of even like in Christianity, like early Christians just sat in their houses and gathered together. And that's how they, created all of, this whole movement. And I think that's the thing. It's about community, it's about connection, it's about fraternity, it's about bringing our energy and love together. And that creates the power.
Mm-hmm.
That creates this way in which we can experience the divine. Because as Jesus mentions, two or more gather in my name, there I am among them. I think that's just a truth of spirit, not
Mm-hmm.
just, Christianity. I think it's just a truth of spirit. When we get together, we speak about these things, we connect in this way. You feel the shift, you feel the power. And yes, we all have that within ourselves, but it even doubles, triples, quadruples, right? Well, the more that we get people together.
Yeah. It's so interesting how human beings feel that mysticism and are drawn to that mysticism. And then somehow it gets corrupted by searching for the external control or power. And that you
Mm.
see it time and time again throughout history in any religion. I've been studying Druidism just because I feel such a strong divine connection to nature. And I'm learning about even Druidism, which is basically finding God in everything that's alive. So it's paganism, but I still consider it like God in everything. There are periods of time in the history of Druidism where all of a sudden women weren't allowed to practice, and it was built like up like Masonic temples, and it was became this power structure, and it's gone back to its like romantic roots now. But it's so interesting why humans keep doing that, even though when you step into the source, into the mystical experience, like it's the opposite of that. And I wonder, like, if it's part of our path on being on this planet at this time is to find that mystical source and not claim power over others' experience of it. Like, I wonder if that's one of the true learnings we're supposed to experience on the planet. I have no
I,
idea.
I love that. And I think that does, I think, resonate with me as far as what I've seen so many times in this sort of world, is that, you see people who are trying to get attention, out, power, whatever you want to call it, for their personal gain. And I think that's where we start to see that happen, is when it becomes about, let's make it about an individual rather than the experience, right, that each individual has. So when it starts to funnel towards a person rather than, hey, wait, no, let me actually reflect this back to you so that you can grow, you can develop. I think that's something I see a lot, where someone feels like they're great or they're good at it, and then it just goes whoosh, and their ego just starts blowing up, and then they try to get everybody else to believe that too. So I think that's the other reason why personal development is so important in
Mhm.
any spiritual path. It's not just let me just be all spiritual and just live there. We also have to, especially if you're working with other people, learn how to catch our triggers and learn how to become aware of what are the underlying motives of what I'm doing and why. The more consciousness we bring to sort of automatic behavior, the better, because we all have wounds. We're all walking around with our own set of lovely baggage. And
Mhm.
if you aren't aware of that, it's too easy for spirituality to mask those things or bypass those things. And then you end up playing out these things, but through this lens of, well, no, but I'm spiritual and I'm connected and all these sorts of things. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have in the current sort of spiritual community,
Yeah.
is people not taking their own psychological well-being seriously.
Yeah, and yeah, it's wounded people wounding other people, either
Yeah,
intentionally or unintentionally, because
right.
a lot of really good people do it unintentionally.
For sure.
And so then the responsibility goes back to the individual again as having discernment, right? And having being aware of discernment. Is there when you teach your students, is there anything that you don't teach them, like that you purposefully avoid or purposefully stay away from? I'm just curious about that.
I think I don't teach them. I think if I were to say there's something I don't teach them, is I really, there's this old saying, milk before meat, if you've ever heard that saying before.
No.
And it's this idea that you present people earlier on with maybe something that is digestible, because
Hmm.
when you try to give them something that's maybe a little bit more down the way, they don't have context for it or they don't understand the value of what you're saying. And
Hmm.
so trying to give students early on what they need to just be aware of and master there before I give them maybe something a little bit more difficult. A really good example of this is, when you have students, like you have a lot of teachers who'll be like, ask a question of the spirit, try to go get that information, ask, right? That's a really good example, in my opinion, on mediumship, of where that is something I think comes later, much later, in fact, because what the student needs to learn earlier on in their development is, how do I surrender, allow, and follow? Once you have that down, when you can surrender easily, follow easily, then you can be brought a question, because then your brain is not trying to answer it. You're following the lead of the spirit and you know exactly how to allow yourself to come to that answer, or let it be brought to you, rather. And that, I think, saves people so much trouble, with their sort of mental activity in it. So in that way, I would say I don't teach people. I mean, obviously there's very obvious things that I don't teach people. Like, I don't teach people light language. I don't teach people these other things that, like, I personally don't find any value in for me. Um, my whole thing has always been efficiency, effectiveness, and accuracy.
Hmm.
That's kind of my jam as a as a medium and as a person. And so, and part of that is because I actually said to the spirit world when I was much younger, I said, hey, I will devote my life to doing this work. But what I need from you is to bring me clear, accurate, and specific information. That was my agreement to them. And thankfully, they held up their bargain by drawing me to those who would lead me that way, those who would educate me in the ways that would create clear, accurate, and specific information. And, I have an understanding now of what is going to help foster that. It's going to help grow that. And that's not to say that execution is always perfect and that it always is going to be perfectly clear, accurate, and specific. No, we're human beings. We're going to have our ups and downs, and your mediumship comes out of you. So, of course, it's not going to always be that. However, the principles and understanding that you can learn will lead you to more consistency, more accuracy. And so, yeah, that's, I don't remember where I was going with any of that.
Well, it was, I don't know either, but it was a great answer for everything. And I think like just hearing you talk about that is what I hear is a value to you is a grounded relationship to yourself and the spirit world so that what you present and who you are reflects that grounded aspect that's evidential. Like, and there's just so much there's so much grounding and safety in evidential mediumship because you are not saying it's someone else from a different planet communicating. You're saying, no, this is your grandmother, and her name was Rosie, and she, lived by herself for the last 40 years of her life, and she loved to garden, and her favorite roses were yellow, or whatever it is. There's like this grounded energy and experience in that where you're left without a doubt of the reality of different dimensions versus saying I'm going to channel these different dimensions, which there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion, if it's authentic. But that's one of the reasons why I just love evidential mediumship. You're doing something that is so far out and hard to believe for so many people, and yet there's no way to deny the experience of it. And that will forever change a person inside out to have that experience. And um,
Well,
I'm,
one, if I may,
yeah,
one thing that I think is helpful with developing your awareness with evidential foundations, with that as a core thing with evidential mediumship, is that when you start to get very good at accurately getting mundane information, or you're good at getting access to information and you've had it validated multiple times over and over, you learn what it feels like to be out of the way. You learn how to surrender. You learn all of these different skills that then when you have instances where you're having things that can't be validated, they are validated by the experience that you're having because you know what it feels like when something is genuine versus what's something you're making up or coming from your mind. So as just a learning tool for spiritual understanding, and learning how you work as a spiritual being, there's a powerful training tool in that process that when you do, let's say, bring through a higher consciousness from another realm, you know when it's you and when it's not you, because you've
exactly.
learned how to discern through your years of these other developments and validation.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And that's like something that's actually very exciting because when you start finding yourself dedicated to the path of evidential mediumship and you're dedicated to your own personal spiritual growth and relationship to to God or source energy, you start going through those changes step by step of, oh, I used to just know this was a mother that was coming through. Now I know it's your stepmother. Now I know it's your stepmother who passed away from cancer. Now I know it, and like the evidence just keeps building because you learn how to trust it more. And that's such an exciting feeling, not just the evidence, but that trust.
Yes.
And that is like any relationship that we have where we start building trust. And it makes the relationship, whether it's with your best friend or your partner or your parent or whatever it may be, like so nourishing and enriching is trust. And you can't have trust unless you take time in this relationship and building it. So that's I don't know where I was going with that, but I just love that aspect. But I think where I was going is I am able at this time to work with outside of just evidential mediumship, even working with my own spirit guides, where I don't see my spirit guides, I just feel them. But now I know how to trust, like when they're giving me advice or sharing things, where I don't have the same evidential experience that I would giving a reading for someone else, but I know how to receive that with my guides in a way of trust that I just feel like it would enhance everybody's life if they just spiritually developed and had a commitment to those relationships as much as we do to our relationships with other humans or the time we spend watching Netflix, which I love Netflix, but but I try to balance it out. I'm curious, like, have you found yourself changing a lot over the last 10 years or however long it's been, like 16 years that you've been a medium or developing as a medium? How long has it been?
20.
20
We're
years.
coming up on 20 in February.
Okay, so I have a two-part question for you. How do you feel like you've changed as a person over that time in relationship to your mediumship changes? And then my second part question, and I'll remind you in case you forget, is there anything that you would love to happen in a reading that hasn't happened yet, or in a spiritual experience or encounter like that that hasn't happened yet, that you're like, come on, spirit, let's do this? But yeah, so that's a two-part question for you.
I
Maybe
made a note just so I would remember, but
I have it written down too.
so um how have I changed? I mean, that I think the difficulty with kind of answering this is like it's so intertwined with just me as a person because
Mm,
my I started when I was 18. So I mean
yeah. You've
it's
grown so much. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean I'm 38 now, so
Yeah.
it's been a minute. So the I would say specifically as it relates to mediumship is the fear is a lot less regarding fear of getting it wrong, fear to not do well. Like that is almost non-existent. I mean, I'm very okay with being wrong. Do I want to get wrong? No. Is it uncomfortable to be wrong? Of course. But I feel very comfortable in not knowing. I think that's a big thing too, is like not needing to have to understand everything, not needing to have to make sense of everything. I think I feel much more comfortable in trust. And maybe this is the other thing that's changed. My trust with the spirit world is night and day. I mean, before it was prove it to me, show me that this is real. Then it was like, okay, well, once I now that know this is real, show me that I can do it. And then it was, well, now that I know I can do it, show me like how far this can go, right? What's possible with this. And so I think that's sort of the journey of understanding. I think for many people who are probably listening, you'll recognize this. Well, is this real? Is this not real? And then once you have that understanding, which one thing was really helpful for me to understand that was recognizing that I believed other people could do it. So when I believed other people could do it, then I was like, oh, I guess you do believe that this is possible. You just don't know if you can do it. And then that was the next question, right? And so we have our experiences that teach us those things. And I think what that does, as we were talking before, builds trust and confidence in yourself, in your own connection. And the interesting thing is that everybody's going to be a little bit different on what those things are that's going to make you go, okay, yes, this is real. And even more interestingly, I definitely had some experiences early on that bolstered my belief that later down the road, I could recognize were maybe more of my mind. And yet that was okay because I needed that little bolster to keep me going down the little path of acceptance of the reality of this. What's the nice thing is if you keep going down the path, the spirit will time and time again meet you in that place of showing you this is real. Here's an example of that. And it kind of continues to build. So at this point in my life, I've had so much freaking evidence to show me that the spirit world is real. I mean, one of the most magical ones is seeing spirit lights happen. And in fact, actually, more recently, we started to get spirit lights again. which is pretty amazing. It's literally a manifestation of the spirit, and it's like little fireflies coming into the room is sort of what it looks like. Or sometimes I think in this last one, it was more flashes of light that everybody was seeing. And that's pretty amazing. I mean, that's one example. I've seen ectoplasm, which I didn't see many, many years before. So I didn't know if I believed in it or not. Is this just something people are making up? And then I got to see it. And so, there's these examples of seeing manifestations of spirit beyond just my personal internal mediumistic experience. I get to actually see them show me intelligence and show me what they're capable of in these very early forms of either physical phenomena or something like that. And while those are really, really cool, they are just bolstering my connection to the spirit world, my trust in them. So, probably the biggest thing is my trust in the other world, like over these last 20 years, just progressively got stronger and stronger and stronger. And don't get me wrong, it's, an up and down sort of journey, but I think in the end, where I am now, I mean, there's just strong certainty in my connection to the other world. And yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I have a question based on what you were just talking about. Um, do you think that spirit tests us or challenges us, or do you think that that's the human experience that we're just struggling with ourselves? I'm,
I would say it's the latter. I
yeah,
believe that the spirit world's like, prove it to me, show it to me. But I do think that there are instances in our lives where we make a choice or we have to make a choice. And I do think that the spirit world will respond to the choice that was the right choice.
hmm
Well, I can think of an instance in my own journey where there was a choice to be truthful and honest or be deceitful.
hmm
And it was during a very kind of darker place in my journey. And I chose, thankfully, to be truthful and honest. It smacked me in the face and like really, even doing the right thing can sometimes hit you. Like think of any sort of like a whistleblower or something like that. Telling
yeah,
the truth can sometimes, have very uncomfortable consequences. But I am glad I did those things because um, even though it was painful and difficult in the time, I genuinely believe that the spirit was like, he made the right choice, so we're going to support him and move him closer to uh,
yeah.
what he is asking for.
I wonder if that's something that happens to a lot of mediums, whether it's something that's recognized in the moment or not, because I too had a similar experience where I felt like there was like a presentation of something really flashy and I could feel a different path I could take. It's like how I could describe it. And I chose not that. I chose like just me and my heart and my humble like wanting to just be a part of this experience instead of anything different than that. I don't know how to describe this experience I went through, but do you follow what I'm saying a little bit?
Yeah,
And
of course, yeah.
okay, yeah, and I didn't choose this other kind of path that presented itself to me. And I feel like I had this moment when I made this choice to stay with my integrity that it was like this piece just kind of like fell into my awareness about who I am and what I'm doing and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it felt like, oh, that was the right choice.
Mm.
And anyways, I just resonated with you saying that because I wonder if other people recognize that choice or if everybody has it or not. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I'm sure that there are people always going to be presented with these different sort of choices. And I think, the fruits of your labor do show, like the fact that you felt that peace, you felt that sense of safety and I don't know. I think following the pull, that internal pull, really does matter. And I think it really does shape us. So yeah, I think the spirit world does respond to kind of the choices. Not that I think that there's a right or wrong, but I do think that there's maybe one is a little bit going to take you this really roundabout way that's going to be a little bit more difficult versus one is like, oh no, we're just going to keep moving down this road that is stable or is fulfilling in some way more quickly. I don't know.
And and that leads me to another question. And I know we've spoken about this in the past, and I'm just curious if this has shifted for you at all, or but do you feel that there are forces that may not be as loving and benevolent? Not saying like necessarily evil spirits or anything like that, but do you feel like there, and maybe this could be considered in the human representation too, but um, like when I was younger, for example, I used to have these experiences. I had very deep spiritual experiences. Like I could see spirit when I was younger, like a lot of children can, right? And I also went through this period of time where I felt like this icky feeling was trying to like access me. I don't know how else to describe it, but it was like darkness. It felt very scary and very bad. And like I was always able to like choose like love and like bring in like God and ask for support from my guardian angels, and I always felt so good afterwards. But it to me it felt like this pulling for my energy. It felt like a pulling, like, oh, we want you to work with us. And I would
Mm.
always choose no, not to. And that started going away when I got older. But to me, it always felt like I could feel the difference of energy. And I could feel that there was a negative energy to people sometimes, but also like, is there a counterbalance to like all of the love? And I'm curious, like, how you feel about that, where you are, because I've heard you say different things at different times. And I'm just curious, like, if you're following what I'm saying, like, what your
Yeah.
take is on that.
Yeah, I personally don't believe in any kind of negative presence or spirit. I think that is um, tied to sort of the physical form and us being here in this physical world where that is a reality. I
Yeah.
personally am a strong believer that when we leave this physical form, the spirit world and what we experience from the other world is just love. Now,
Mhm.
I think a distinction to be made is that from other people, we can feel sort of difficult, challenging energies, but it's not consciousness. It's not a presence that's wanting something of you. It's instead rather um, our way of making sense of the world and interpreting that discomfort or that feeling. So the fact that you have that experience as a child, I would be my first place would be to, if I were to ask this, is would be, did you have some sort of belief system instilled in you that had this light and dark sort of dichotomy? Because if so, then it's likely that you were feeling something, but
Mhm.
it was interpreted as this is this bad thing. Now, what you were feeling may have been psychological in the sense of um, maybe there's something going on in your life at that time. Maybe there was a belief system, or maybe there's experiences that were manifesting themselves in you. And for your child brain was able to go, hey, this is part of the bad and this is part of the good. I'm going to make the choices to go towards the good. Rather than it being like a consciousness that's like, hey, I'm alive and have my own thoughts and feelings and will. I'm going to try to get you to come to this darker thing. It may be that you were experiencing something that it was trying to understand the world through the context of what you understood at the time.
Yeah,
Does
I can.
that
Yeah, I was raised super Catholic. And so there was a lot of energy on good and evil. Like there was a lot of focus on that. So I 100% could say that. And also, like, what do you think about the phrase as above, so below? What does that mean to you?
yeah, it depends on in what term. Now, when I hear that phrase, I think of astrology.
Oh,
And sort of how that phrase resonates with me the most as far as
mhm.
accuracy, just because I find that astrology can be incredibly accurate if you know how to do it. As far as above, so below, I don't see that as necessarily a spiritual principle in the sense of um, maybe some sort of cosmic. thing. I think the reason why, and maybe this is my materialist upbringing coming in, is like if I think of the heavens, or if I think of this like higher sort of perspective, I mean, I think about the universe, and I think about the explosions and the, like the supernovas and black holes and like all of these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I think in that sense, I start to feel this maybe insignificance of like what this physical world represents, because everything is constantly being torn apart and brought back together, torn apart, brought back together, etc., and over long periods of time. And I think for me, this sort of physical world is an illusion. Like, and so because of this illusion, it's a place for me to learn and try and connect with this sort of illusion of separation.
Hmm.
When we leave this play, we enter back into what our actual nature is. And I think as we recognize what our soul is, what our actual nature is, it doesn't have jealousy, hate, anger, all of these sorts of things. So I believe that when we kind of take off this sort of meat suit, if you will, we are connected and our consciousness connects back into this bigger thing. I think the things like fear, hate, jealousy, control, like all these sorts of things, that's tied to survival. That's tied to being here. So my belief is that there's this underlying principle that our essence, our consciousness, our being is that most loving, most accepting, higher part of ourselves. And if we look at actual death experiences, so I'm referring to near-death experiences, but I'm using a different phrasing because these are only the ones that had cessation of brain function, heart function, lung function. They are
Hmm.
clinically dead.
Yeah.
And you look at those instances, not a single one has any sort of negative experience, demons, devils, anything negative. In fact, it's the quite opposite. They feel the most love, the most peace, the most everything that they've ever could possibly describe. And so I believe that that is actually our nature. That is actually our experience. That is truly what we are. And any of these other sort of fear, hate, all of these sorts of things, that comes from trying to be alive in this physical body. It's a biological sort of expression of it. So when one says as above, so below, I think it's trying to tie together that the heavens reflect the earth in some way, or the earth reflects the heavens, either way you want to look at it. And I think that that is maybe makes sense if you're looking at things from this physical realm. But when you spiritualize, you come above that physical realm, you separate from that physical realm. This space is our true nature. This space is sort of the energetic world that I think is ultimately us. Whereas everything that happens within the confines of maybe earthly spheres, sure, could there be something that feels uncomfortable, dangerous, negative, et cetera, et cetera? I just don't think it has consciousness. I don't think it is a part of this sort of web of reality that you and I are a part of at our core being.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally love that perspective. That's really, really beautiful. And let me ask you another question about that. I have done a lot of readings at this point, and you've done like, 14 times as many as me. And there have been times where I have had these beautiful readings with people, highly evidential, and they'll show me how they're working on their soul on
Mm,
the other side, or they're like in school
yeah.
or continuing to develop, right? Or I've seen where someone has come through. I remember one like snippet of this where they were talking about how they were looking back at their life on Earth, right? And so I'm curious, like, do you think that souls come here and we're given this opportunity to learn and grow? I don't want to even say advance ourselves because that almost sounds hierarchical, but like experience more in an egoic way, because that's what we are as humans. We're egos, right? Like our mind and our brain, and we tell ourselves stories and we tell other people stories based on how we want to experience things. And so when we go back to source, when we go back to like our true consciousness, as you said it, or our higher selves, or our deepest soul expression of who we are, Do you think we continue to grow there? Do you feel like people like who have committed horrible crimes as humans go through a period of reflecting on that and healing through that, through the experience of um, what some would call a life review? Like, what's your experience giving readings or in meditation, feeling into that?
Yeah, I do think that there are places of learning and development on the other side. I think that the Earth is one of the options of how you can experience that. I think that there's probably other physical realms where
Totally.
you can
Yeah.
experience and grow and learn. Um, I do think that from what I've, several things, from what I've learned in the history and the messages that have come through from other mediums, they would agree with what you just said, which is, that there's places of learning and growing on the other side. My own guide has brought that through in the trance states before. It's always funny because I don't always necessarily know what I believe, even if my guide is saying, because I'm one of those people who's like even going to question my own self.
Yep.
But so, in my experience, do I believe that there are consciousnesses continuing to evolve on the other side? Yes, I do. Um, Maybe we're putting it into human forms to say
I
like it's
was
a
just thinking
tool,
that.
yeah, or it's something like that. Probably that's probably us trying to like make sense of it. But I think the
Yeah.
underlying essence of what is occurring in our spirit is probably exactly the same. So yeah,
Yeah.
I continue to grow.
So you do. But then this is what leads me to the other question. If we're continuing to grow, what does that actually mean? And and does that mean that if we're continuing to grow on the other side, like we are continuing to grow what? Like our capabilities of love,
Yeah.
our capabilities of vibration? Does that mean that we go back home at different understandings and experiences of love?
Yes. So I would say that is exactly what it is. I think it is all about understanding love. I think we can grow to certain degrees. Obviously, I'm not on the other side right now, so I can't say, but I think we grow to certain degrees in this container of love and care and reflection and all of that sort of thing. But wow, is the human experience providing this opportunity to experience what it would be like without it, right? And I always tried to kind of highlight what this does, this human experience. People often go like, "Oh, let's try to get the world to world peace and everybody's going to get along and all that stuff." And look, I would love that, and I want that, and I want to work towards that. And I think the physical world is supposed to be difficult. I think it's supposed to be challenging. I think it's supposed to be because this is learning. This is us pushing ourselves. I mean, if you think about the times that you grow the most, it's often when you're the most in pain, most uncomfortable, and you have to overcome it.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Along with that, it also gives, when people are being heinous and terrible, it provides opportunities for other people to be the helper, to be the one holding the light for other people. It gives them a chance to show what they're made of, what courage they can have, what love they can bring, even when things feel hopeless. It's in those ways that I think we get to shine and show. So while it's easy for us and probably reasonable for us to focus on, man, this world is so hard, we also have to remember that if we're looking at it in the context of this is a play, this is an illusion, even though it's very real at the same time, um, we're also getting the chance to show up and be loving and be supporting and finding that thing within us that moves us closer to love despite whatever's occurring. And I think that that's a much more intense and powerful thing. Can we learn through love? Of course we can. And we can learn through hardship as well, and maybe sometimes even more intensely.
Yeah,
Because I mean,
absolutely.
and this is where the clue comes in, I think, as to why this seems to be accurate. When we look at near death experiences and actual death experiences, we see the life review is always about your relationship to love and how you impacted other people. That is the criteria. That is what you're basing everything off of. Of what did I do that created love and positivity and helping and charity and all of these feelings, right? That are ultimately based in compassion and love.
Mhm.
Versus what are the ways in which I harmed someone, hurt someone, and the down effects of that.
Mhm.
There's no other thing. There's no like, how much money did you earn while you were in physical form? Like, how much did you, go fishing or whatever? You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing else about the human experience that is ever adjudicated except for how much did you love? What was
Mhm.
your relationship to love? So I believe that that is clearly the thing that we're here to explore, to discover, and to build that relationship and connection to.
And
Um,
to, yeah, and to love yourself through the obstacles.
yeah,
Obviously, or not obviously, often I feel like people are taught so much to love others, but when you really truly love yourself, then you just automatically love others because you see yourself in them and vice versa, and you don't feel like you need to have any exertion of control over others. And that's what makes the world a better place, is when you really just want the best for others because you understand what love is. And I think that in relationship to hell on earth or the experience of hell on the other side, it's the recognition of not loving or not having the presence of love, which feels like hell,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I think ultimately that's what we are. We're these love seekers. We're
Yeah.
these beings of wanting to be loved and loved. And that's where, like, if you even think about the psychological damage that occurs in individuals, it's always the isolation, it's always the separation, it's always these sorts of things that lead to negative outcomes mentally. When we create spaces of love, connection, all these sorts of things, community, all the things that bring us together as one and support each other. Obviously within reason, because obviously we can look at collectivistic countries and be like, or cultures and be like, oh, this also has its downsides. Well, it does when you take it into human form. But the main point is when, as growing beings, we need love, we need support, we need connection, and without that, we aren't, at least in the physical form, not the best versions of ourselves. We harm and hurt and all of these sorts of things. And the cure for that is love, is support, is care. And we see that time and time again.
And then we also see, like, when spirit comes in and wants to work with us and to remind people of like their life on earth or show up in mediumship readings, like, you have to think then they're just trying to help us out by showing us that love or showing us that there's more and that we don't have to be stuck in the stories of our minds on this planet. And there's a reminder of like, oh yes, I'm back home and this is what the experience is here. And I love you through this. Because then I was just thinking, like, what's the point of spirit communicating with us? And it's to share that love and to remind us on our path of that love, right?
Well, and I also think too, when you go through your life review, you see every single way in which you impacted others and you re-experience. It's not just like of life flashing before your eyes. You live and experience every single choice you made, and oftentimes the down effects of those choices.
Yeah.
So many times spirits coming forward because they want to acknowledge the pain that they cause, the hurt, the sorry that they have now with this new vantage point that they understand. And so it's for their development and their growth to seek amends. And it is also for you so that you can have healing, so you can have growth. And as you said, sharing the love, sharing this like idea of like, hey, and I think this is a big part of it too, why spirit communication happens. They want you to realize that you're not just this body, so that you can live in a way that is aligned to that higher spiritual self that we talked about, that one that is rooted in love, that part of you that is connected to everyone and everything, so that you can live your life differently here and create and bring more harmony, more love, more connection while you're still here.
I love that. And just to kind of, I still didn't, I have one more question for you, and then we're going to have to close up. But it just made me think of the Christian idea that we're going to meet God for Judgment Day in heaven when we die. And in reality, like we meet God every day when we look at another human being and when we look in the mirror and when we look at like anything in the natural world. And it's how we treat each other is how we are treating God. And I don't know why I felt like saying that, but
Absolutely. And I think
just our
what I've
conversation.
often told people is that I feel like we touch the essence of God when we love one another.
Yes.
Like it's that experience of the love that is us touching what that is, like God.
Yeah.
What God is love. So when we are experiencing that with one another, that's actually the moment that we are experiencing the divine.
Yeah.
And it's allowing us to kind of no longer be separate, but rather be together because love is the binding. And as Rumi said, love is the bridge between you and everything. I
Yeah.
think that is so true. And if God is love, then God is in everything. And it is the way in which we interact and connect and love.
And have compassion for and offer healing and offer service to each other. And that's part of the spiritual path. When you start recognizing that God actually is in every experience, you start treating each experience differently.
Totally. 100%.
Totally. Okay. And just because our last conversation we had, you were kind of at the beginning of your being a healer and doing that work. And I had a couple of friends that I referred to you and both had really amazing experiences in different ways. And so I just am curious where you're at with that now, like where you are. Just
Yeah,
give me
thanks
an
for asking.
update. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So it's interesting with the healing. There were I think maybe growing, I'm going to call them growing pains in the
Yeah.
sense that um I think in the beginning, I was very gung ho and like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get this, I'm gonna figure this out, and da 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 da. And then my own sort of disappointment and learning how to manage when things worked and when things didn't was a big thing. And
Mhm.
having to be like, how do I learn to accept that I can't help everyone? I can't do this for everyone. And then also, the belief in the ability I have found also is playing a role in effectiveness. Because if I'm not able to focus and concentrate and stay fully in the experience, I tend to notice now that there's a little bit less of effectiveness when I can't stay in this knowing, which I think I had in the beginning. Maybe that sort of blind faith sort of thing, or like beginner's luck in some ways of
Mhm.
how wow, I'm just doing this and I don't have anything to compare it to. So just like mediumship, we
I was
start
going to say, it's just like
expectations.
mediumship. Yeah.
100%. We start getting expectations and we have attachment to the outcome and all
Mhm.
of these sorts of things. And I could tell that that was starting to seep into it. So there
Mhm.
was a time period where I kind of took a little bit of a break from it because I could feel myself trying and doing these things. And then more recently, I've only just started to come back to it to kind of re-engage it and go, okay, now with what I understand, what else do I need to do here? So it's been a very interesting sort of evolution. That being said, I learned a ton, like a ton about how the energy is given. So like there's several things, several principles that I'm recognizing is one is flowing, allowing it to flow. Two is this idea of directing. So what I'm directing, what kind of energy am I directing to the person? Three is administration. So how I deliver the energy plays a role as well. So
Mhm.
like exploring and playing with these different combinations of how this is actually done would give me different results. So I
Mhm.
might be giving the same kind of energy to the problem, but I'm doing it more like almost like a spray paint to like the whole area versus an injection or versus running it back and forth over and over and over the spot. It all varied. And one thing might not work. The energy you're sending might be the right energy, but it's how you delivered it that was the incorrect thing, or vice versa, right? So it's this really interesting thing of like discovering that that actually made a big difference. And so different problems had different things, different causes of the issue, and then also recognizing sometimes you're only going to be able to help the symptom of pain or whatever the issue is, and maybe not actually touch the root problem, but then you shift it and then you start working on what that root problem might be, and then that's actually where you see, the true healing. And it's interesting, the more information that I have, I also notice the more information I have about what the actual problem is, like physiologically, the quicker I could get results, which I thought was really interesting too. Even though there are also other methods that I use that doesn't require me to understand a single thing of what is going on and yet still get results. So it's just this very interesting, different thing that I find myself sort of trial and erroring to some degree. And then also with my own mediumistic development and understanding, I recognize some of these principles also play a role of like desire, distraction, expectation, those things that cause tension in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's probably part of the reason why I was able to do healing so maybe easily is I had these other understandings that I think supported the process in some way. But yeah, I'm still growing it. I'm still developing it. I feel pretty
Mhm.
confident in it for the most part, but I would say I'm excited to see how it continues to grow and develop the more that I do it.
Are you still offering it online where you
Yeah.
work with
Mhm.
individuals and everything? Yeah.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And are you still taking classes or doing workshops, or are you kind of done with that and now it's your own personal evolution?
Yeah, I'm just allowing it kind of being its own personal evolution. I mean, the person I learned it from, which was Charlie Goldsmith, um, it's not like he has like a whole series of things that you continuously do. It's like, here's what I do, but figure it out. That's sort of the
Yeah.
way you're taught.
Mhm.
And and one of the things he says is like your creativity is your greatest gift with
Mhm.
this sort of thing. And so you being able to, trust it and follow it and figure it out is very, very profound. So yeah, I'm definitely still very interested and enjoy doing it. I'm such a person that wants to be able to make it work for every single person. And I've just had to accept like that's just not the case. Which is
Well,
difficult, I think, for me.
yeah. And I don't you think that, I mean, with mediumship, every single person can have it, right? But maybe people who have illness or who are sick or who have pain, they're meant to go through the experience to walk that journey on their own. So maybe your accessibility is also dependent on what their contract is in life, or like
Huh.
what their healing journey is in life and what you're allowed to impact and what you're not. So it's not really about you, it's about their own
Yeah.
their own journey.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe even more so what I would say is that even as a medium, you're not going to always bat 100 and you have
Mhm.
to learn how to be okay with that. But I think it's more challenging than mediumship because you want to help these people who are in pain or are suffering or are going through these things. And um, that's the hardest part for me because I'm just like, all I want to do is help remove your pain and your suffering and help you. Now, I can get to a place of maybe some level of detachment to that outcome when I'm actually working. But I think if I were to be honest with myself, I definitely want to be able to support and help every single person who crosses my path. But I recognize that's not always the case, and that I guess is okay. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean don't do it. One of the best things Charlie Goldsmith said was, "It's not about the outcome; it's that you tried." So judge yourself not on how for whether it works or not. Judge
Mhm.
yourself on did you try to help someone today? And I was like, that helped. That's helpful.
That's actually really helpful, like in
Yeah.
all of life. That's
Yeah.
actually really wise advice. So, well, on that note, we'll leave that. Why don't you say that line one more time for our listeners?
It's not about you being attached to the outcome of how well it goes, but did you try to help someone today? That's what you should judge yourself on.
Beautiful. Michael, tell everyone where they can find more information about you and what you're up to.
Yeah, so all of my social media, whether TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, is Medium Michael Mayo. My last name is Mayo. And my website is mediummichaelmayo.com. And also you can study with us at the Oak Ridge Institute, oakridgeinstitute.org. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Michael, for our awesome talk today. I loved it. And I will catch you guys all on our next episode. Take care.